My name is Weldon Wade. I'm an avid ocean advocate, diver, and community activist. Well, for me, what I love doing the most is bringing the community together. I love hosting beach cleanups and lionfish culling events, bringing businesses and the community in general together to unite for a common purpose, which would, in the cases that I'm involved in, is removing trash from the ocean. I mean, the ocean really connects us all, and connecting with people globally has been important to getting my message out there. It's just been a wonderful experience connecting with schools and students to talk about the problems that our ocean faces. And it's great to get together with other ocean heroes to talk about what we're doing and getting our message across. I believe one of the cornerstones to protecting the ocean is human connection and awareness. So the more people are aware of how important the ocean is to our health and our well-being, that's very valuable. Good evening, everybody. We are live. So much going on around here and around the world. It's like, whoa. But first, shout out to PM Bermuda International, TBI Blue Wave, for providing the show with flawless internet. Thank you so much, TBI. For those of you that are here just to see Jessica is backstage. She's smiling. And for those of you that aren't here to see or hear myself or Jess, we do have a cave explorer. He dives into those dangerous places, yeah? Doing some amazing science. And I'll introduce our special guest tonight in a bit, but I want to just make sure that we're good. As always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. Well, we've got our two guests backstage, which is super dope. So let's get it started. Hello and welcome to the Wade in the Water Late Live Show, Episode 3. I'm your host, Weldon Wade. I'm a diver, an educator, and advocate for ocean sustainability. I'm also a proud PADI ambassador diver, and it's my job to get you diving and keep you diving with a purpose. This show right here is to help keep you informed, aware, and educated on what's going on here on the island of Bermuda, across the region and the world, and to get together and share stories and experiences. So this is really built by divers for divers. So the plan is originally to run this limited series for 10 weeks, every Wednesday night, live on both Facebook and YouTube, with replay available right away and past episodes at your fingertips. So also, this is new, but look out for the Wade in the Water late live show to make its debut on popular podcast platforms where the audio of the show will be available. So strap in, hold on tight. So whatever happens after the 10th episode, I don't know yet. To find out, watch this space. So share, like, follow, subscribe, just watch the show, engage. It all helps the show to grow. So if you'd like to be a guest, jump on impromptu like Jessica did in episode 1, and now she's just back every week, which is dope. Or sponsor. What you eating, Jess? If you'd like to sponsor, send a note to hello@weldonwade.com. So I'm broadcasting. You can see I'm in the blue room. A little darker because I put up some extra stuff. So I'm in my home here in Bermuda with extra soundproofing, which has blocked out some light. So I was born here, raised here, and out here we are really doing our best, all things considered, to enjoy Bermuda summer 2021. But I got to send a shout out to my buddy Wani at Limelight in Southampton. Got me looking extra crispy tonight. And shout out to, they're laughing at me, shout out to Rebecca at Tabs for the threads. So you know how it goes. Last week, I talked about how great the weather was, and my advice to everybody, wherever you are, is when the weather is good outside, go there. Just go there. Go out there. Lately, we had a little bit of a twist. Tropical Storm Henry has been lurking around the island, and I'd love to share a little thing. Let me just bring that up. I like to kind of go with the visuals. Bring this up. There we go. So this is weather.bm. Last week I showed off or showcased really windy.com. Weather.bm is strictly Bermuda, and you can see some interesting stuff going on there. But we had a high lately of 86 degrees, a low of 79. Sea surface temperature is about 85.1, so the ocean is warm. It's really nice. But we can see that the Bermuda Weather Service have put up this public synopsis. And what's really great as well is they've got live radar, which is really cool when it works. Shout out to weather.bm and the whole team behind the scenes that really makes this happen. It makes it possible. At one point, the radar is down, and whenever you're planning an outing, whether it's shore diving, boat diving, any kind of diving, you really want to lean into as many weather tools as you can to see what the forecast is going to do, see what the tides are going to do, because just around here, an incoming tide and an outgoing tide makes a big difference. And I'm sure Fernando would speak to that as well. In the caves, everything rises and falls with the tides. We don't have any freshwater lakes or rivers here, so we're a bit fortunate where we've been spared some mosquito-borne diseases. And when other islands in the Caribbean and in the region were experiencing dengue and different things like that, people were diverting to Bermuda because all we have is salt and brackish water. But you can see the forecast is looking a bit gnarly. I'm not going to play around too much, but with Tropical Storm Henry lurking, things have gotten interesting. But let's get into the news. So the Masterworks Museum, this is local news, guys. The Masterworks Museum is proud to announce its partnership with the Bermuda Underwater Exploration Institute in honor of the late artist and diver Teddy Tucker in Dive In, the Art of the Wreck. The exhibition is from August 6th through the 31st. So visit either the museum to collect your punch card, and once you've received both of your stamps, you can return to Masterworks to claim your Teddy Tucker themed goodie bag. So behind me, this isn't for show. This is an actual bookshelf here. And Teddy Tucker, for those of you that don't know, is probably Bermuda's most renowned and certainly world-renowned wreck diver. Him and his buddies found and discovered many of the wrecks that sort of scatter Bermuda's platform. And I referenced the bookshelf because there's a book. Where's it to? I should grab it. It's called Treasure a Diver's Life. It's the big book at the end there that Teddy Tucker put together. And he passed away just a few years ago, unfortunately. So just when I was getting, my feet wet in diving, I never dove with Teddy, but Teddy is one of those legends. So hit Masterworks, hit BUEI, grab your bag. Speaking about BUEI, like I mentioned last week, but I'm going to mention this every week because I serve on the board, so I kind of got to do this. It's what we do. BUEI is proud to announce the island's first ever Youth Climate Summit. So during a full week in November, young people ages 13 through 22 will focus on climate issues accumulating in a year-long action-based volunteer project managed by a youth climate advisory board. So I could give you more detail, but I'm just going to have you take some notes. Visit buei.bm for more information wherever you are in the world. And if you are on the island, just pop by the Crow Lane building as you make your way in and out of the city. Big buildings, been there since 1995. I helped build the place with my uncle, who is a welder. I told that story already, so we'll skip past that. And this is really cool. I look for stuff to share with you guys that's relevant to the ocean space, and something really special is going on. So yeah, September 4th, the annual Bermuda Sandcastle competition is taking place. So it's really dope. Lots go around the event. There is some classes where you can meet some rock stars that are really phenomenal sandcastle creators. But I gotta send a very special shout out to Hannah Emerson, who I went to Orc Academy with. We weren't in the same class, but we were in the same year. And she's taken it over, and It's really, really great. So if you're not up to much around September 4th, you can visit and see the sculptors doing their thing. But I just recommend you participate. They got some really cool prizes. But so we've got that annual sandcastle competition. So let's keep that in mind. But tomorrow, sandcastle stamps are going to be released. So evidently, because this was news to me, Hannah is working with the Bermuda government and the Bermuda Post Office. And what they're doing, they've issued its second commemorative stamp release of the year. And this second release is featuring the Bermuda Sandcastle competition, which is crazy. So I checked it out, and Hannah's work is on an actual stamp. And for those of you laughing, you might not know what a stamp is. You know, people still send letters in the mail and still need to use stamps. And so Hannah's got her work on these stamps, which is, to me, it's historical. It's huge. So a government spokesman said, founded almost 30 years ago by Nikki Garrett, the Mainstay Beach competition is held annually at our beautiful award-winning beach called Horseshoe Bay on Labor Day weekend. In 2017, Hannah Emerson, a longtime contestant and previous winner, she just kept winning. She took over the competition, and Ms. Emerson has spent the last 4 years showcasing Bermuda's beaches with weekly builds across the island. The featured stamps depict a variety of intricate, creative sand sculptures which have delighted residents and visitors over the years. So here's the thing. My step-grandfather, rest his soul, was a very avid stamp and coin collector. And I'm not in that space, but it is a really cool thing to do, collecting cards, stamps, coins. It's really cool. And so from what I understand, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, they have the first day covers, and I have a few of them. But what you want to do is get to the post office on the day of their release, and you get the first day covers without the post office stamp. I think that's right. If you've got a first day cover without the stamp, it has way more value, or it's likely to have way more value over time, because it lets the collector know that you actually picked that up on the first day it was released. So I'm going to pick up a bunch. Visit burnnews.com, where you'll find the article where it explains a bunch of details. I did try to call the post office today. I tried to email them, but I'll just physically try to get around there tomorrow. So switching gears, the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program. I'm the communications coordinator for the program, so I got to mention that this Prosperity Program, or BOP, is a partnership between the government of Bermuda and the Waite Institute and the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences. And the goal of BOP is to foster the sustainable, profitable, and enjoyable use of ocean resources for present and future generations. So what I decided to do with the support of my team is start hosting a beach cleanup on the last Sunday of every month, which doesn't really seem, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's, once you do one, you got a lot of time. No, like the next one is August 29th, which I looked at the calendar. It's about a week and a half away. And I believe we'll be cleaning up Admiralty House Park. We've been there before. We're going to go there again. The last cleanup was at Shelley Bay. I just find Admiralty to be such a large area to clean. It does get quite a bit of debris over time. And then we'll send in a dive team to dive for debris as well. What I recommend, find the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program on Facebook, and you can always visit the website at bermudaoceanprosperity.org. Now, last week I also talked about bioluminescence and how during the summertime the algae will glow like glitter under the water when you move your hands and feet. But I spoke to a really good friend of mine, David O'Shea, and David let me in on something that is really, really cool if you're into this kind of thing. Now, I know tonight's topic, after my intro and monologue, is going to be cave diving in Bermuda, but I'm going to speak for a minute or two about sea cucumbers. So I think when you're from here, you kind of look at certain things and you see them so much, you kind of don't really care about them. And sea cucumbers, I believe, are one of those critters where I'm in the water so much. I see sergeant majors, I see, fry, barracuda, parrotfish, sea cucumbers, some other urchins, and upside down jellyfish. And you're kind of like, yeah, it's cool. Well, David let me know that certain times of the year, you'll see, if you got to be in the water around 10:30 at night, around as many sea cucumbers as you can. And what you'd witness is a spawning event. So these little sort of cucumber. Yeah, sea cucumber, cucumber. These cucumber critters that, as far as I know, again, not a scientist, never claimed to be, but these things will crawl along the bottom of the ocean, eating different things, kind of poop out sand, they kind of leave a little trail of poo. And you think, okay, well, they have to reproduce. There's got to be a way they multiply. And some people might not even worry about that or think about that or care about that. But these things will actually rise up and spawn. So David's super adamant that I take the time to get in the water, find some sea cucumbers, enjoy the bioluminescence, and then with my dive lights and with my buddies, bear witness to this event where you see this typically very slow, static, very docile looking organism literally rise up and spawn, and that's how they reproduce, which I think is pretty wild. So Fernando is on the StreamYard feed. He is backstage. I'm gonna bring my beautiful impromptu co-host on the live, as well as our special guest to talk all about cave diving in Bermuda with some specificity. His name is Fernando Calderón Gutiérrez, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. But without further ado, I'm going to put my headphones on and bring our guests on the call. And as always, if you have any questions, any feedback, let us know. But let's get busy. Jess.
Hi. How are you guys?
Everybody's been waiting 20 minutes to see your face and hear your voice.
I'm sure.
There's a lot that you and I can talk about, and we can always plan for another live. I want to welcome you back to the Wade in the Water Late Live show. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but something that we did talk about offline and that we did have someone email me on was, because we talked about safety, getting in the water, and things to overcome to get into diving, to get started. And we covered a bunch of stuff, but we never talked about equalizing. So we touched on a lot about like the fear of the water and not knowing how to swim, but equalizing was a big thing that normally, at least like now that when we mentioned it and we talked about it and I thought about it, I was like, holy cow, equalizing, right? So I don't want to dive into that just yet, but I want to kind of put that on the burner, and we can always come back to that either tonight or in our future show. But I will say that I was scuba diving very recently, and I had issues equalizing down in around 60 feet. We were making a jump down to 80, and we were doing a little bit of a sawtooth. And I was like, yo, I can't equalize. And I just sort of soldiered through and stayed shallow and until I can kind of work it out. So even the more experienced divers can face challenges with equalizing. Did you want to just touch on that real quick before we bring Fernando on the call?
Sure. We can make Claire wait a little bit longer.
Yeah. It's cool. He's smiling, you guys.
It's one of those, it doesn't have to, part of it has to do with experience, because I have found that over time and the more often you dive, the easier it is to equalize. But I mean, a stuffy nose is a stuffy nose. If your sinuses are swollen, if you have allergies, if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you're just a little bit stuffed up that morning, diving might not be in the books for you that day. And listening to your body and being and actually following through. So a lot of people will, and I want to be very clear. So whenever Weldon said that he soldiered through, he said he stayed shallow. So he didn't soldier through and keep going down, because that is a really good way to have serious ear trauma. You don't want to have any sort of like ruptured eardrum or anything like that. So making sure that you are equalizing early and often as you're descending, just real gentle. So some people, I think, try to push too hard, and that can have negative consequences as well. So just light, easy, to equalize, you just pitch your nose and just light, easy exhale through your nose. You're going to feel that nice little pop in your ears, just like you do on the airplane whenever you're coming down. and just taking your time. Some people aren't able to equalize really quickly. And so it takes them a little bit longer to get down to whatever depth they're going to. So listening to your body, taking the time you need, that's really, really important. And just paying attention. Some days it's just going to be a no-go and it's going to be disappointing. But it's so much better than having to go to the doctor and have to be out of the water for months while your ear repairs. And you know, the I don't know about for other divers, but one of my biggest fears is if something were to happen to my ears, where I wasn't able to dive again. So that I take very good care of my lungs. I take very good care of my ears, because those are the things that help keep me diving. So just being really careful and you know, equalizing early and often. So not waiting until you feel that like big buildup or pressure in your ears. I like to like every other breath as I'm going down, unless I'm going down really fast. But basically every other breath, just super chill, super calm, just a little bit of pressure there, get those ears cleared, and make sure that you're taking good care. It's allergy season and you have really bad allergies, like that might not be the best time to dive for you. And if you're thinking about getting certified, maybe wait until a time where you don't have as bad allergies, so that way you have a little bit more enjoyable experience.
Fully agree. And I think one of the things that stands out the most is again bearing in mind that normally, you know, when you feel the heavy pressure, it may actually be a little bit too late to
Yep.
equalize safely and painlessly. And I've been guilty of not being conscious of that, or I can kind of sometimes, not all the time, I can actually equalize without pinching my nose,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But it tends not to last very long. So I'll be down and I kind of feel a little bit of pressure, and I try to do the trick, and the trick doesn't work. And then I try to do the push, and then I'm like, oh. So that's when you just communicate with your buddy or your guide or your instructor, and you say, I just got to go up a little bit to deal with my ear, and you're usually pretty golden. But I do think that, you know, in addition to the mask clearing and just getting used to the fact you're breathing on this, you know, artificial, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, that certainly equalizing and just getting used to the kit, yeah, is a big thing. So thank you. We did open that little can of worms while Fernando is hanging out in the back. So what I want to do is introduce and welcome cave diver and biologist Fernando, who will be able to introduce himself. But before I press the button, this all happened very organically. Like I've said before, we build it while we fly. Jessica recommended Fernando, sort of a bit of a twist of fate. Jessica had posted Fernando's paper, which is about the Walsingham Caves, to her Facebook page. We went live with Jessica. We brought it up. A colleague reached out to me to see what we can do. Can we get Fernando on the show? And Jessica, Fernando, and now here he is. Boom. Good evening, sir.
Hi, hi, good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No sweat, brother. It's wonderful to have you on the show. So if you're watching this live or you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. So Fernando, this is just going to be totally off the cuff, talking all about your experience and your time cave diving and putting your paper together, and sort of all the nuances that make cave diving what it is, and then certainly touching on the science. But what I'd love for you to start out with is sort of the elephant in the room. Yeah, it would be the safety of cave diving, the things that people need to consider, and then the sort of, if you're aware, and I'm able to fill in if necessary, just the laws about how it is quite restrictive to cave dive here in Bermuda. So I'll let you take over.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and I think it is actually the perfect way to start talking about cave diving, especially when people is trying to do something else like cave exploration, to do the map or science, because the more important thing first is always the safety of the divers. So something to consider is that diving in a cave is really different in terms of the safety than when we are diving in the ocean. Because if in the ocean you have a problem, you can just be like, hey, not okay, let's just go up. And you can just go up. You may have like decompression sickness or like something different, but still you can just go to a hyperbaric chamber, call Dan, go to a hospital. Like once at the surface, it is easier because then you can breathe. In a cave, this is not the case. Like sometimes you have been diving for more than an hour and you are inside of this cave, which means that you have a ceiling above you. So if you have a problem at 1 hour from the entrance, you need to go back for 1 hour before you can go out. So because of that, it is really, really important to always be prepared. And with this, I mean that you need to have all the certifications that are needed. So an open water is not enough.
No.
Not nearly enough, actually. But also having all the required equipment. And people that see a cave diver or in general a technical diver will believe that there is equipment for 3 or 4 people. No, it's just for one. But also being mentally okay. Like even a good diver with all the preparation, with all the equipment, sometimes you are a little off. When you are doing technical diving, it is definitely not okay. So it's something that you don't want to do when you are doing any kind of diving. But especially when you are talking about technical diving, you need to be very careful about having everything in the correct way. If not, it's better not to. But
That's super true. And I certainly want to touch on your time in Bermuda and specifically your paper. But I want to do as well is just let the audience know that the technical diving community in Bermuda is actually quite small. And the number of men and women that are certified to be able to explore these caves is actually quite small. And the Walsingham Nature Reserve is land and trust. And you really need to not even think about cave diving in the caves in Bermuda. You do need to have reasons for science, first of all. But then even before that, you need to have permission and all the right certification and know the right people and have all the right kit. So there's a lot that goes into exploring the caves in Bermuda on scuba. Yeah. So Jess, I just want to pull you in real quick before Fernando does a deep dive and talk about the technical diving community over there in Texas. Is it big or do you have many people that will go beyond recreational limits, whether it's overhead environment or beyond recreational depths or anything like that?
Yeah, so out here, we do have some technical diving. There, anytime that Texas Parks and Wildlife also has some technical diving whenever it comes to monitoring out at so in Texas, we have oil rigs, which you mentioned the refineries in the last episode whenever you visited Texas. So we have oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico. So whenever divers are going down to those deeper depths, because the legs go all the way down to the bottom. And so in our shelf, we have a pretty wide shelf here, but once you get past that shelf, it drops off and it's very, very deep. And so anytime that you have divers going down, you need technical gear, usually multiple tanks. There's some rebreather divers here as well.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of cool, fun stuff. We actually have a technical instructor down here in Galveston who is started teaching some courses at one of the local dive shops. And so there's some really cool stuff, especially whenever it comes to research diving. Research diving is on that cusp. It's not technically technical diving. We're under AAUS, so it's a little bit different. But also out at the flower garden. So when you were out there with us, so we're up on the coral head up at the top. So we're between 60 and 100. But once we get down further, there's a lot of stuff to see. So a lot of people don't think about what's below that 100, 120 foot range. There's actually a lot of really cool deep corals and also, taking ROVs out, looking at lionfish, but technical divers can actually get down there. So, yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know that. But we've got cave diver Fernando locked in, and I just can't wait to hear more about your actual time here in Bermuda doing all that cool science in that dark, scary overhead environment that requires so much training, so much equipment, so much planning, so much prep. Um, yeah, Walsingham. What makes Walsingham so special?
Okay. So, like, before talking more about the caves in Bermuda, something I want to mention is, in this case, the research paper that we published was a literature review. So, unfortunately, I have not been diving in Bermuda, but I have been diving a lot in the caves in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. So, particularly for this paper, is something that has been done just like collecting every piece on the literature, and most of the work has been done like the cave dive research has been done by Dr. Thomas Highlife, but also local cave divers from Bermuda, like Rob Power, Paul Hobb, Brian Kaycock. So it's actually a lot of people, and it's something that in science we always need to be collaborating and working with the local community. Because first is the people who really knows the case because they are like diving every day. And because of that, they know which places can be like more interesting. But especially because that increase the safety, and also is one way to live the knowledge in the area that we are working. So for this paper in particular, is something that actually started in 2000 when another paper was published by Culver, a professor also in the United States, who found which were the caves with the higher biodiversity worldwide. And he was not only talking about caves underwater and terrestrial caves, he was just looking at every single cave, and one of them was Washington Cave. So that gives you an idea on why it is so important biologically. It's between the top 20 caves worldwide in terms of the biodiversity. And it doesn't matter if you are thinking about underwater or terrestrial, like it is in the top 20. So just to give you an idea, when we were looking at the species that are already known in the area, the Washington region, because there are like several caves there, have already 78 species. And from these, 63 are stegobians. This means that they only live in underwater caves. You will never find them in the ocean or anywhere else. And something even more surprising was that 65 species are endemic. So 65 species only live in the caves in the Washington area there in Bermuda. So if something happens to those caves, we will miss these species, like they will be gone. Not only for that region, but for the planet.
That's interesting. And those are the best words that I can find, just because it's mind blowing. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I explore the caves as just a regular person, showing them off to people. You'd occasionally swim in the caves from time to time. I encourage people not to put on any kind of sunscreen if that's something they're going to do. But it's certainly a bit mind blowing to understand there are 75 species of critter in the cave, and only 65 or so of those are found in those caves. And like you said, like there are many caves that make up that are part of that Walsingham. I think is just over 20 acres of land. And what I've come to understand after doing a little research is that many of the caves, not all of them, but many of them are actually connected underground,
Mhm.
Which is pretty wild. So everyone on the live or watching this on replay, if they know anything about Bermuda Caves, Crystal Cave and Fantasy Cave are the two caves that are open for the general public. to pay a small fee, get down and see the cave without actually getting in the water. And it's, got a gangway and stairs and lighting, and they got guides that'll take you down and tell you a cool story and turn out the lights. And it's stunning. It's beautiful. It's crystal clear. Granted, there's a lot of technology in there by way of cell phones that have fallen out of people's hands and they're on the bottom of the cave. So it's just it's a collection of cell phones that are just there. And without the owners, keen to get anyone to retrieve them, you drop your brand new phone into the cave. That is where it may remain for a very long time. But outside of those caves, people have heard of the Grotto Bay caves, where the Grotto Bay Resort is. There's a cathedral cave, and then another smaller cave where they will allow you to swim. And then more sort of accessible to the public, free and kind of open, are other caves along the actual trail between Talmore's Tavern, the Blue Hole, the Blue Lagoon, where the dolphins used to be when I was a kid, and the Glade and other little bits and bobs. So I say all that to say, I hope we're not harming those critters in any way, man.
So, like, now that you were talking about these caves, like, is where things start being a little bit more complicated. So, like you mentioned, Washington Cave and also Palm Cave. These are actually two cave systems, which means that you can enter from different entrances. So, to give you an idea, for Washington Cave, there are currently known 7 different entrances. And these two may be actually interconnected. So, and this actually takes us to the definition of cave itself.
Okay.
Like, it is a natural void in underground where a human can fit. So, and in some cases, like, humans are going to be really pushing it to be able to fit. So for divers, it is not uncommon that rather than having the tanks on the back, the tanks will be on the sides. So that way you can go into a smaller area. And in some places, you even will like remove the tanks and push them in the front of you. So now it is like something that it is just like as big as you are. However, still, like we are pretty big. Like most of the fauna living in these caves are only a few millimeters long or even smaller than that. So the areas that we can recognize as part of the cave are not necessarily the only areas that these species are being able to let you go. And that is why a lot of times we are talking about the connectivity between these regions. Because even if we cannot fit, probably the organisms can go from one to the other place. And we see a little bit of this with the movement of the water. It looks like it is just moving entirely from one to the other. And unfortunately, that's one of the main problems in terms of the conservation, that we still do not understand like how much these species can move, and also like how much we are affecting them. Because like for most of the species that we know, we only know the name. And in a lot of cases, we don't even know the name. We still need to call them. So for the conservation, that's a really big problem. And not only in Bermuda, but in a lot of places, what happens is that you just throw oil or something, and not even in the water. Like all the rock has like a really high porosity, so it can just go through the rocks until it reaches the cave and contaminate the water.
Okay. That's not good.
No.
No.
No, actually, like to give you an example, near one of the main cities in the Yucatan Peninsula, 40% of the fresh water in the cave region is considered polluted, too high for human consumption.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
And people is not even aware that they are polluting the caves. So, like for me, that's actually the main conservation problem, not only in Bermuda but all around the world for caves. The main problem is ignorance. if we do not know that this environment exists there, why should it is impossible to take care of it.
Right. Interesting. Fernando, let's take a pause real quick, because what I failed to ask is actually, where in the world are you right now?
Right now, I am in Galveston, Texas, the United States.
Great.
But I am originally from Mexico.
Nice, man.
So one of the reasons I like so much to be working on the Yucatan Peninsula, Cozumel, that area, that is also a really big cave region.
Cool. What I love to touch on is that while, and I try to frame this for our listeners and viewers that are interested in caves but probably have no desire ever to actually go the path of becoming a cave diver, is that while the caves in Bermuda are super restricted and very sensitive and basically a no-go, if cave diving was something that you did want to experience, it's something I've done, but it's been in Mexico. When I've been to the Yucatan, to Tulum, and to Cozumel and different areas. Whenever we go to Cozumel, we'd do a bunch of boat and shore diving, but then we need to jump over to the mainland and explore some caves that are open to the public in a sense. And as long as you are comfortable as an open water diver, you've got a guide, you go through caves that are quite expansive and quite safe. Cave diving safe. That's an interesting combination. But what I want to do is you mentioned something as well, Fernando, that's quite interesting. Is I think when people think of a scuba diver, Jess, they think of the diver in the wetsuit with the BCD and one tank on their back with air and the basic regulators. Fernando hit on the fact that there are some restrictions in the caves in Bermuda and certainly caves around the world where the tank on your back is just not the best way to go. So Fernando mentioned side mount. So side mount diving, where the cylinders are on your sides, is something that is quite foreign to quite a lot of divers and certainly foreign to the wider community. It's something cave divers do all the time. In fact, as I understand it, side mount diving, the genesis was cave exploration. And it's so dope, Fernando, because I could talk all night. You mentioned some rock stars in the space. You mentioned Raw Power. You mentioned Brian Cacook, who I know from the Bahamas and the caves in Abaco. Of course, Dr. Iliff. I know numerous local cave diving rock stars here that do all that work, changing all the different scientific instruments and stuff. But Jess, side mount, is that something that you dabble in much where you are?
So I have only got to side mount dive once, and I haven't gone through and taken the entire course on it. But it's such a comfortable way. I know you guys can't see because from here up only, but I'm a pretty short person. I'm not very tall, and so doubles on the back for me is pretty uncomfortable until I get into the water, because it's a lot of weight on my back. It's a lot of it's 2 tanks wide. It is wider than I am, so it takes up a huge amount of space on me. So side mount diving is really comfortable because you have the tanks, they're underneath, so your arms are just kind of around them. You can clip them on and off. So if you are already in the water, like, you can have your team members like hand it down to you, hand it back up. And Fernando can go more into this about actually, like, whenever he's in the cave and actually having to switch out and change tanks and staging bottles in as you go. But whenever it comes to side mount diving, first, if you need multiple tanks for especially in tight spaces, or if you are a smaller individual, it is definitely, at least in my experience, more comfortable than doubles for sure.
For sure. Is side mount something that you see often in your, just in
Casually?
Yeah.
Not really. Every once in a while, you'll see someone side mount diving, but in a lot of the places that I'm diving, whether it's in the locally here off of the Fling, out in the Gulf of Mexico, or down in the Caribbean, don't see a whole lot of side mount diving unless there's like a particular reason. Every once in a while, someone will be out and will be practicing because they're going to be going on to a dive where they do need to. So they're practicing before they go onto that deeper dive or onto into a cave dive. Every once in a while, you'll see someone who's a air guzzler who likes to bring two. There's one in my family that I won't name any names. Sometimes we'll dive with 2 tanks.
Okay. Okay.
So just to keep up with my air consumption, but it's not a competition.
I see. Well, Fernando, let's talk about some stuff. So, you know, I dabble in mostly recreational diving. I've done side mount, cave, rebreather, but I kind of have a bit of a cap. So we're all in this journey of putting our eyes underwater. What got you into cave diving? Like how did that come into your life? Did you just wake up one day keen to get into it? Was it school? Was it someone in your family? Were you inspired by watching something on TV? Like, tell us how you got to be a cave diver.
Actually, cave diving took me into diving.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about it.
So like, since I remember, I always wanted to be a marine biologist.
Yes.
And one day I was watching a documentary about cave diving and all of these like beautiful formations and everything. And I was just like, they're just talking about like all these really interesting geological features, like the stalactites, the stalagmites, but nothing about the life. I want to know what is about the life. So and that was secondary school. So since then I was like, okay, I want to do research on underwater caves, which means that I need to be a cave diver. So I literally didn't knew like what was necessary. I didn't know back then that a certification was needed. Once I started my undergrad, I started just taking one course after another and another, and I haven't finished. I am still taking diving courses. It's a whole career in there, and like different tools. Like that is one of the reasons there are so many courses. Like it is like you are going to be doing this kind of dive, then you need these tools.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, like side mount, cave diving, deep diving, and others. But yeah, cave diving took me into diving, and I don't think there is a lot of people who are able to diving in that way.
Yeah, that is cool. I didn't know that. I thought I'd save. I didn't want to research your background too much, and not surprised. I'm actually surprised. That's really cool. That's dope. So I think one of the things that's important to convey to myself and maybe Jess and certainly the audience on live or replay is okay, cool. I'm just gonna be real. We got these caves underground. I know they're there. I've seen the cave rescue that they did with the kids a couple years ago, so I'm aware of it. But I think a lot of times what happens is in this space, it's interesting getting people to care about a certain cause that you may be advocating for. So we talked about these species that are in these caves. We talked about protecting these caves, or at least raising awareness of the caves being there and these critters being inside the cave. But why, not to digress, but like, why should we care about these caves when
So
yeah, like why care? Like you're doing your science, you love what you do, you're doing one of the most what's considered one of the most dangerous kind of, I don't want to say sports, but certainly it's tough to get life insurance. And I say this respectfully because I used to work in insurance. They say, what do you do? Do you for travel insurance, life insurance, health insurance? Do you scuba dive? Do you base jump? Do you skydive, or do you cave dive? And they rank you. And as soon as you say scuba, they're like, oh, So I don't want to digress, but so like, why should we care? Like, why shouldn't Joe Public just wear regular sunscreen, swim in these caves? Why should someone care about these what I consider to be huge, certainly in Jessica as well, important to our ecosystem?
So there are several reasons, and the first one is that we are sharing this planet, like we are not the owners. So just because of that, we need to be also uh, we need to be careful with the rest of the species that are living in this planet. So we know that there are so many species that will only be found in caves. So if something happens to those caves, they're gone. For people who is more pragmatic or wants to think more in an economical reason or like other reasons, but for me that should be more than enough. Uh, One is that the fauna that is in the caves is really particular. Like for example, there are some species that are endemic to the class level. So we are talking about something as different as a fish and an ascidian, that is an animal that looks like a sponge. So things that are completely different that help us understand a little better about the evolution of the different species. Some of them are only found in caves. So like we are missing an entire link of the biology if we do not study caves. Then a few years ago in a cave in the United States, a bacteria was found that is capable to support any kind of antibiotic. And it's a bacteria that has been isolated there forever. So if we better understand how these bacteria can do that, we may be able to develop new antibiotics that will not be resistant.
That's important.
I should think,
That's a great reason to protect the caves, right? They've got
yeah, that is why I was saying like there are reasons for everyone. Like
Yeah.
for the people that is used like a human and is like okay, we are sharing, we need to share the planet. But for those that are only looking for economical reasons, like there are reasons too. So also like this, like if you think about extraterrestrial exploration, like no, with all the probes to Mars and other places, life is not going to be on the surface in a lot of these places. They are going to be caves. If we want to know how to do research in those areas to be looking for life, caves are an excellent place also too.
Wow.
And in some regions like in Florida, the Yucatan Peninsula, all the fresh water is underground.
Right.
So if you do not care about the caves, just think about the water that you need.
The water to drink to survive. Yeah.
To do everything. Like it is impossible to survive without water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a
there are
lot.
many reasons.
Yeah.
And that's even understanding that we have been doing serious research in underwater caves only for 30, 40 years. So we really do not know anything. And we already know that they are really important.
It's always interesting to hear that, and I think that certainly we don't know everything. There's still so much to learn. There's so much science to do. There's so much to explore and uncover and discover. But it's always very interesting. We think like we're in 2021 now. Haven't we figured everything out? And the answer is very clearly no. And when I think about and I'll throw in some names. I'll do a little name dropping, but Jill Heinherth has been to Bermuda a few times, doing some cave exploration around 2011, I believe. They did like a deep cave dive. So, Fernando, you mentioned where cave diving does have different levels. And even just to get, I guess, your cave one, we don't have to really dabble too much about agencies and the specificities there, but cave one, just basic cave diving, the rules of thirds, the any rule that Christina Zanotto talks about. You can go in so far and then you got to come back, and then you want to go further, you go and you come back. Now, certainly, what I'm trying to visualize and put into words is that you can penetrate a cave that's in about, I don't know, 30, 40 feet of depth under the rock or whatever. But the challenge is the penetration. Well, when Jill and Brian and her team, and even Paul Heiner was here as well, they did a cave dive that I believe started at 300 feet. So they went out, submerged down 300 feet, and then did the cave penetration. And it was when I was just cutting my teeth, sort of in the scene. And I remember I was like, if I only had the certifications to just work as safety, I would have been part of something that was, I mean, I'd probably say once in a lifetime, because you can't just call these guys up and say, look, let's go and do that cave. And shout out to Jill, who is a rock star in the space, along with all the other, pioneers of cave diving that have been into this stuff since the early days, since rebreathers were made by hand, essentially, guys piecing them together in their garages, right? So, and yeah, man, when you're like, the water, that people drink comes from these systems underground. They're definitely well worth protecting, for sure. And we don't know what these organisms, just circling back to Bermuda and these 75 critters that exist in our caves, I'd probably say we don't really know what they do. They're there. We're sharing the world with these organisms like we share the world with everything else. And it's sort of like, what do they do? And I dare you to think what would happen if they were to disappear. We would have collapse. We've seen what happens when we remove species from the web. Around here, Fernando, we don't have many sharks on our platform. And now there's all kinds of things going on. In the cover of the newspaper yesterday, I wish I had it. It says our seagrass has collapsed, right? Front page, like, we can't, it's not hidden anymore. There's a project going on right now to put cages over areas of seagrass that still exists. And that's a wonderful effort that the Bermuda Turtle Project are working on. Shout out to Jennifer Gray. You're doing phenomenal work. But Jennifer pretty much said, like, look, collapse, as I see it, is beyond repair unless we do something really, really drastic. And I'm sure there was a time recently, guys, where we never thought seagrass could be gone. So by just removing that element, it's like, okay, well, not only does it feed turtles, because we call it turtle grass or seagrass, it's just food for the turtles, they'll figure something out. But we recognize, no, it's home to all kinds of things. It's an ecosystem in of itself. And so to take that out of the web, it's gonna be something that we just haven't properly prepared for. And I'm hopeful that we figure out a way to fix this, because the roots of the seagrass is gone, the seagrass itself is gone. Some areas where we've put the cages, the seagrass goes anyway. So we're like, well, if the turtles aren't getting to the grass, what is happening with the grass? So it goes into this whole science, and it's up to us as a people, with the government and our scientists and everyone in that space, to try to figure this out as quickly as we can. So yeah, it's definitely important to do all the work that you're doing and do as much science as we can, as much baselining as we can. So it sounds like you want to encourage more people around the region and around the world to get into marine biology, get into cave exploration, and help out. That's what it sounds like to me. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and definitely, like, everyone in their own job, in their own lifestyle, they can do something. You don't need to be a cave diver to take care of the caves.
That's true.
Like, there are small things, like thinking about what is happening with the water. Is it being treated before it is released or not? Like, and sometimes things as easy as using a cell phone or a computer for one more year rather than just change it like every year. Like, every action that we take has an impact. It can be positive or negative, but it will have an impact. And it's something that we need to consider. Like, obviously, we don't want to be living like without computer or internet, food from all over the world. But there is one way that we can do it in a more sustainable way. And that's one way that also protects caves.
Mhm.
And not only the caves, like you were talking about connectivity. So when you are talking about how these environments are collapsing because you're removing these species, something else that we still do not understand a lot is the connectivity between different ecosystems. Like the water going out of the cave, reaching the reef, how it is helping or affecting.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
That's interesting.
again, like these butterfly effects is true. We just do not know and we do not understand it just because we don't have enough information.
Not enough information. Okay, I am totally with you, 100% with respect to you don't have to necessarily be a cave diver or a diver at all in order to make a difference. Living sustainably, being just aware, and we talked about this as well, like just being aware. And yeah, you're gonna find all different kinds of people out in the world. Some can make decisions quite easily, and there are some people, some in my family, where we're working so hard to keep the lights on. Bermuda is the most expensive place in the world to live, so it is quite challenging in the work that I do to get people to care about stuff that they can actually see regularly, which would be our coral reef system and our important parrotfish and all these things that are quite visible, where caves are quite unseen to a degree. Yeah, people are like, well, if the coral is bleaching or experiencing white or black band disease, or people start poaching parrotfish, it's like it is what it is. The ocean will recover, nature will recover. Um, well, we have a massive seagrass problem among other issues that we're dealing with, and it's kind of like one thing we hear often is small things certainly do become big things, and when things are avoided, overlooked, delayed, postponed, um, even with all the science, um, you got to act. Like there does come a time where you have to say, look, let's act. Now Fernando touched on sustainability and how everything's connected, and I talked about the web and all that. But Jess, in Texas, what are you? I mean, you're both in Texas. I recognize that, but what are you guys dealing with down there in terms of the ecosystem and humans trying to keep everything in balance? Recognizing, tongue in cheek, that a lot of what's going on that does have those negative impacts is a result of our actions, um, to
Yeah.
a degree, right? It's just such an interesting conversation because you think we do the right thing, and sometimes it's a matter of making that call and figuring out, okay, well, we got to do what we got to do, and action, reaction, and causality and consequences and stuff. So, what's going on in Texas, guys? In addition to maintaining the ecosystem by way of the caves.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things for people to keep in mind is when we talk about nature, we talk about the environment or ecosystems. I think a lot of people see humans as removed from that, and we're not. We're part of the ecosystem, we're part of the environment, we are part of this chain, whether we're talking about water, whether we're talking about animals, food chain. So I think that's so important to not in your mind have us be removed from that,
Mhm.
because what we do affects the environment, but what happens in the environment affects us. So if we don't have clean water, that doesn't just affect the fishes, it doesn't just affect the animals, it affects us. We have to have clean water. We have to have clean, safe water. If there's trash everywhere, that yeah, it's
Mhm.
really sad pictures of the ocean with trash in it. Well, guess what? That's not just affecting the animals that live in the ocean. That's affecting the people who live in coastal communities. It's affecting people across the world who want to buy seafood that
Yeah.
was originally imported from that area. And so all of these different things. And like Fernando was talking about, whenever it comes to, we don't always know whenever you remove that piece, what's going to happen. So something that would be maybe easy to be apathetic about, where you're like, oh, I don't really care about parrotfish. I don't see parrotfish. But the effect of having parrotfish removed from an environment and maybe having an entire fishery collapse, that will affect you. If you were relying on that for a job, if you're relying on that for food, on tourism. So those are all things to think about whenever something doesn't maybe seemingly relate to you directly. Is that we're all intertied. We're part of nature. We're part of, I think so many people forget that we're animals, like we're part of the system.
Yeah,
and a lot of people don't like to think about it that way, but we are.
We're animals out here, you guys. Jessica said it. It is the truth. We are. I wholeheartedly agree. I got a couple of questions. I do. One of them, which is coming on my WhatsApp, I got my buddy locked in. He's asked Fernando, what's the most amazing thing that you've seen while cave diving, and where was it?
Like for me, like I cannot like say there is only one thing. Like for me, the most amazing thing is the quantity of life that you can find.
Interesting.
And it is just like talking about what I can see, because we are still have like all the bacteria and everything. But like for me, that was really surprising, because like everyone is like, okay, there is not light, there is no photosynthesis, therefore there is no food. It's going to be empty, and it is not. So literally, life finds a way.
Life finds a way.
Pretty
It is cool. It is cool. When I would take people, because I do these Airbnb experience outings, and I often will take people to just look in the caves and stuff. Yeah, I kind of mumble that same stuff. I'm like, no sunlight, no algae, not a whole lot lives in here. And then occasionally you will see a fish or two, and typically what happens there is the fish would have followed the cave divers into the caves and kind of get stuck. But that aside, yeah, there's certainly life will find a way. It's so interesting. It is, and I certainly can appreciate the formations, the stalactites, the stalagmites, and the whole conversation of sea level rise, the rise and fall of the levels, and how there are certain formations in Walsingham that we can go and see any day that are submerged. And I think that at least myself and my circle of friends, like, it's just really tough to imagine, wow, like there was a time where the sea level was, I don't know, 50 feet lower and then 50 feet higher. And then, the fluctuations as you go through the different ages. And I mean, just to recognize that a stalactite, takes about 100 years to grow about an inch as long as it's untouched. It's just like, in my lifetime, this thing may grow an inch. It sort of really brings, it brings a lot into focus in terms of like, wow, like as a human animal, we're only here for such a short amount of time, and then we're looking at a formation that's 8 feet long. You're like, well, the only way for it to have gotten that long, hanging from the ceiling, and you do the math, you're like, holy cow, this is a really old piece of crystal or limestone or rock or whatever you want to call it, which is pretty dope.
And actually, like, I love that you're mentioning that, because that is something that you can use to date. So they are like the rings on the trees. Like, you can take one of these stalactites and see like how old it is.
Okay.
But not just that, you can actually be looking at the isotopes of oxygen and other elements to see how much it was raining, not now, but thousands of years ago.
Interesting.
And it's something actually with the sediments from blue holes in Bermuda. They have been able to see how many hurricanes have been in the last 20,000 years in the area. So like, these are things that are actually helping us to improve the models, to know like how many hurricanes are in a region, if we need to be expecting more or less hurricanes in the near future. Like, and it's the kind of things that caves are helping us to discover.
So Fernando, what you just said is we're able to look at the sediment, and that'll help us determine how many hurricanes we've had. The sediment,
Yep.
like the silt at the bottom.
Yep.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
man.
because and
That's
this is
cool. That's cool.
a research that Dr. Maherston is a pioneer in, because like if you look at the blue holes, they are just like a funnel.
Okay.
So the sediment will be entering to this blue hole, and it's impossible for the sediment to walk. It will never be washed out. So you always have like this thin layer of sediments, and depending what kind of minerals you can find and other stuff, you can be like, okay, like this long ago, it was a really bad dry season, or it was raining a lot, or we have actually a hurricane above here.
Okay. That is cool. That is cool. I got a couple things I'd love to put up on the screen. I want to shout out. I did this late, but shout out to Chris and to JD and to Beth that have jumped on the live and put comments in. So JD put out there that is such a difficult question for experienced divers. So I think I kind of the little faux pas asking about like, can you think of your it was a valid question, but yeah, certainly for experienced divers, it can be quite interesting. And what JD showed here, and that's the link which you can't click. I'll figure out a way to put this across all the platforms where this is being broadcast to. But that is the article, you guys, to which came out yesterday. Wait, 20, yesterday, the 17th. And that's the title of the article. You can see there, guys. Seagrass beds have completely collapsed in the last 4 years. So it's a very sobering find or declaration, if you will. But Chris mentioned, what did they find at 300 feet? I'd love to find the article on that and all the photographs that the dive team took and get all the dates and stuff right. But they just found a cave and went inside the cave and found some formations and other amazing things that they were probably the first and last to see. And that just speaks to how cave diving, I feel, as a form of diving, and there are many forms, is definitely you have to be cut of a certain cloth. And I think it's just amazing because there are only a certain amount of people that have been in the caves in Walsingham on scuba, and their names are all, I can name half of them off the top of my head. And the reason that I can do that is because my mentor was part of the Bermuda Cave Diving Association. His name is Leon Kemp. So he was instrumental while he was on the island in doing all kinds of cool things in the cave. So he we did our BSAC stuff. I said I wouldn't talk about agencies, but we did BSAC stuff, PADI stuff, GUE stuff, and he sort of mentored me through my journey. And I just encourage everyone to certainly look at cave diving as a diver, and take some bits and pieces to apply to your recreational diving. That's a little tip I would have, because I was trained by a cave diver to be a recreational technical type diver. So I, at one point, Fernando, funny, I did have the 7-foot long hose around my neck for a while, just doing open water diving, single tank back mount with the long hose tucked down my belt, and the piston clips on the regs, and we do S drills and all that stuff, just for open water wreck penetration. So we're the shipwreck capital of the Atlantic. We do have a couple of intact wrecks. One, namely, is out north, and we tend not to go down into the engine room because it is completely dark and considered overhead environment. And I wouldn't go down there unless I had a few lights and at least went over some really good theory and practical with a good team to do that stuff. But yeah, man, it's so much that we can cover just strictly cave diving as part of scuba diving. But certainly your findings as a cave diver and as a scientist are pretty phenomenal. And I think nature is such I think she's resilient, man, but she's pretty delicate, you know. And we're doing some pretty gnarly stuff to the environment that I hope is doesn't reach a point where it's irreversible. Um, Certainly with corals and seagrass and estuaries and all the what's the word like you call underwater the underground lakes. Jill says it all the time, and the name isn't coming to me. Just what those things are called. The underground river.
Chilling caves or the underground estuary.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's all super valuable, man. So what I'm going to do is just ask the audience. There's a few people on the live. Most people are sort of, at least around here, my buddies are in bed. They're like, why do this live so late? I'm like, hey, I got my reasons. I got my reasons. And not everybody is in this time zone. We've got some people that are awesome, like Fernando and Jess, that are over to the west, that are in a different time zone where it's not as late as it is here. But JD and Chris, Beth, thank you so much for your questions so far. We've been on the live now for an hour and 18 minutes. Fernando, Jess, I don't want to keep you guys much longer. I'd love to do these for about an hour, but I'd love to give you guys the opportunity for some final words to our audience that are locked into the Wade in the Water Late Life show with respect to cave diving, the critters within, and how important they are, and how things have been for you as a cave diver. It's all yours, man. Whatever you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah, well, like I think it's really important for everyone who is interested in to be looking at the path. Like for sure, you will need to take like an open water, an advance, a lot of experience. Like just to take the first course, you will need like 100 dives. But take it easy. Like there is not something that you should be rushing.
Okay.
If it is something that will take you years it is, because that will make it a safer way to do it. So cave diving is not something that you just want to jump in. You want to perfect every single skill you need before to. And then you will be grabbing other skills like deep diving, decompression diving, and others. Once you're comfortable with those, then you will take them also to the caves. Do not rush it because we don't want to have accidents.
Right, exactly.
Also, it's really important, and not only in caves in general, like if you do not have a reason and if you do not have a permit, do not grab the fauna. So a lot of people is like, oh yeah, I will just take it and either like have it on my dining room, or I will just like send it to a university or something. And it is important not to, because like in some cases the population sizes are going to be like really low. So without knowing, you will actually be affecting the population size. So and probably you are taking something that is already known, or like you are not going to send it to the appropriate person, or it was not collected in an appropriate way, so it is worthless for science. So it's really important. Enjoy the cave, enjoy the fauna, but you need to be with an objective. If you are as a tourist, just all behave as a tourist. If you are doing exploration, then you will be doing like all the cave maps and everything. So at the end, like every person has a specialty, and sometimes like if you're really interested, reach to me or reach to another biologist working on caves, and probably we can collaborate. Like every single time I am diving in a cave, I am diving with somebody else that most of the time is a cave instructor, but not a biologist. So we can always like work together.
Okay. Nice. And I'll certainly encourage everyone to visit. Certainly, Fernando's got his Instagram handle up on the screen there. I'll also make sure he's easy to find on the replay. Jess has hers there as well. But I'm gonna end this by putting Jess on the spot. It's always great And Fernando already provided his tidbits in terms of call to action, what people can do to make a difference. Yeah. So I'd love to end this live with your advice on what people can do, just regular people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that imperfect action is better than no action. So it's not, I'm never going to use another plastic bag again in my life. And if I do, I might as well just quit. It's finding ways. How can I reduce the number of bags that I'm using? What are ways, do I want to start composting? If composting doesn't work for you, what is something that does? What is something that you can slowly put into your life? It's like what Fernando was talking about with diving. We slowly build these skills so that way then you could become that awesome cave diver who's doing all these exploration dives. You're not going to start that on day one. So it's the same thing with becoming an environmentalist. You don't have to be the perfect environmentalist who stopped wearing deodorant and hasn't bought a piece of clothing in 20 years. You don't have to do that. So it's these little things like, can I buy something used instead of new? Do I need to buy that thing? Is it something I can make? Is it something I can barter? Like, all these little things are, can I start, as consumers, we spend money on things. So you have power there. So where are you going to take the money that you have, that you've worked really hard for, and what are you going to spend it on? So are there products out there that you need this either way, but one's a slightly better choice than the other? So making those imperfect actions, and if everyone was doing that, and everyone is finding different ways, and maybe they're habit based, so it's kind of uncomfortable at first, and we've talked about discomfort in the past and on the show, and then you build, once you're comfortable with whatever that change is, then making other changes, what are other areas in your life. So it's not all these things at once. And the other thing is thinking about where your water goes, where your waste goes, so Fernando was talking about how the oil can actually travel through the rock into the caves and affect the cave ecosystem. One of the things to think about is, okay, let's say you live in an area that doesn't have caves. So this doesn't apply to me. Well, that's not true, because if you live anywhere near a freshwater source, whether it's a stream or a river or anywhere, water has, it rains and then it's going to run off into whatever that body of water that's near you. And a lot of times then that is going to keep flowing all the way out to the ocean. So something that is happening in Ohio can affect, for those in the US, Ohio, it can travel down the Mississippi and all the way out through Louisiana and affect the Gulf of Mexico, affect the flower gardens. So remembering that we aren't as divided and siloed as sometimes it feels like, even if you live very far way away. So whenever it comes to our watershed, especially if you're lucky like me, I live on top of a watershed that goes out into Galveston Bay. So the things that I do at my home affect what's happening in the bay and then out in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a responsibility. So I'm lucky I get to live near the ocean. It's wonderful. But we have a responsibility to the area that we live in and to the areas around us. So just kind of think about that. Remember that it's all connected. We're not removed from the environment. We're part of the environment, and just start taking those imperfect actions now. You don't have to wait. It doesn't have to be perfect, and just build on it.
Love that. Couldn't agree more. We do have a couple of questions though. The same guy that asked about favorite experience and whatnot has asked, can you name your favorite cave? Fernando.
The others are going to get jealous.
Others are going to get jealous.
I would say El Aerolito in Cozumel Island. And it is just because it's the first cave I was diving. So it was the first cave I dove as part of my course. And also the first cave that I started doing research.
That's cool.
So
yeah. You never forget your first, they say. And it's pretty wild because as soon as you get into the sort of cave diving circle, you learn all about the pit and Dos Ojos and all the popular Yucatan caves in Tulum. But then you can't get far without hearing about Ginny Springs and all the caves in Florida. So certainly for those that are keen to sort of put their foot in and have a look around in the region for places to go to learn, to explore, or even do I guess what I called earlier. It's really, once you're full scuba, sort of a cave explorer or cavern experience, a cave experience. You sort of stay in the light zone and then come back once you're comfortable, kind of penetrate a little bit more, and then after that, you're going to be told quite clearly from your guide or your instructor to, yep, time to take a course to learn rules of thirds and that 7-foot hose I was talking about, which comes a bit later. Well, we do have another question here. I'm going to put that up on the screen from the lovely Beth Staples, who was in Bermuda not too long ago. We hung out, had a wonderful time while she was here. Hello, Beth, if you're still on the live. So Beth says, what are your top tips for exploring and enjoying the caves, but protecting them at the same time? And I don't want to interject, but I think Fernando hit on this earlier, about like essentially like not taking trinkets and leaving only your footprints and that kind of thing. But is there anything more, Fernando, than that?
So for exploring itself, like the first will be to be certified. The second is to be working with local people because they are the ones that know the most. But also be sure that you are diving with someone that you are really comfortable with and that you know that is really professional in what they are doing because it is not a game. Like it
Okay.
is fun. It is a lot of fun, but it is not a game.
So
And
let's
for
say,
the conservation, just go to the cave, enjoy it, go out.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Like
I had a feeling Beth might not have been leaning into the scuba side, more so the dry caving and probably snorkeling or even, dare I say, free diving the caves. Um, yeah, I'd say, what we say, Justin? I said, make only bubbles, leave only footprints, something like that. Uh, yeah, just do.
Take only pictures, leave only bubbles.
Yeah,
I think.
and do no
Correct me if I'm
harm.
wrong.
Yeah, just do no harm. And it's, when you recognize how fragile the ecosystem is, it takes a century for the thing to grow an inch. You got to recognize, if you decide, let me just break this off and give this to my grandma, it's like, maybe that's not the best, maybe not the best thing to do. Um,
yeah, that actually diving itself can be really ecologically friendly. It is just important to remember to not take anything, but also, especially for people diving in the reefs, work on your buoyancy so you are not damaging the coral. And it's the same in the caves. Only the advantage is that by the time you arrive to the cave, like you already have like good buoyancy.
Very important. Yeah, I've seen some divers do some pretty bad damage to corals and other structures, and certainly, with our archaeologically significant shipwrecks in Bermuda, people, many of them are open. Quite a few of them are closed, so we don't allow people to know where they are, and some of them actually have been uh, exposed to do some science and then covered up with sand again to preserve the wood. But certainly, a lot of our wrecks that are pretty dope, they're metal, and you'd find people touching them and getting their buoyancy a bit off, and then you'd see a little piece break off, and you think, well, that might not be too bad. But if every month you've got a diver that's touching things and breaking things off or standing up on things, um, over time, the net is of it is going to be just further deterioration of the wrecks. Notwithstanding, we also have hurricanes. I just mentioned Tropical Storm Henry. We've got these storms that will do damage to our wrecks and our ecosystem too. So a lot that we can dive into, but I think we certainly got through a good fair portion of the meat and potatoes of what we set out to achieve tonight. I always look at the outcomes, and I'm quite happy and delighted and honored to have had you on the live, Fernando. And as always, it's wonderful to have you here with me as well, Jess. I'd love to have you guys on again in the future to talk about all kinds of cool things. And on here, we're building it while we fly. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And whether you're watching this on the live or on the replay, thank you for tuning into the show. We got another few weeks to go. Hope to have another series of guests on to talk about all kinds of things water related. That's what the show's all about. It's in the name. So until next time, what do you think, Jess? We're going on? Or not? What are we doing? We're going to hang out? Do an after party? No? No?
Oh,
No after party?
thank you so much for having us. It was great.
Yeah. Till next time, next week, same time, same place. Thank you so much, Fernando. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. This went really smooth. I think everyone seems pretty cool and happy. Jess, thanks again. I could just thank you guys for another half hour. We'll skip that. Guys, we are out. Cue the TBI ad. Shout out to TBI and all the sponsors and supporters that made this possible. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
My name is Weldon Wade. I'm an avid ocean advocate, diver, and community activist. Well, for me, what I love doing the most is bringing the community together. I love hosting beach cleanups and lionfish calling events, bringing businesses and the community in general together to unite for a common purpose, which would, in the cases that I'm involved in, is removing trash from the ocean. I mean, the ocean really connects us all, and connecting with people globally has been important to getting my message out there. It's just been a wonderful experience connecting with schools and students to talk about the problems that our ocean faces. And it's great to get together with other ocean heroes to talk about what we're doing and getting our message across. I believe one of the cornerstones to protecting the ocean is human connection and awareness. So the more people are aware of how important the ocean is to our health and our well-being, that's very valuable.
So, I'm still here. Show's officially over. I might trim this off, the replay. I don't know. It's just been such a wonderful day. It's wonderful to be on this live with you guys doing this show. I can't wait to see how it grows over time. I'm looking at the numbers, whether we have one person on the show or 50 people on the show. It's just wonderful to have this platform and to have the tools and resources to be able to bring this to you guys. And yeah, there's no one else out here really doing this in this way, right? And it's just been a wonderful journey being a Bermudian diver and having just putting in the work. Been doing this for over 10 years now, and I'm just happy, and I just feel very blessed, and it's a privilege and an honor to be here with you guys, just be alive during this time, despite everything. And so much more I want to share with you and bring just to the forefront. There's so much going on that I think that, when you're in, and I call it like the space, you're in the ocean space, you're in this world, this dive world. You live it, you breathe it, you eat it, you sleep and you dream about it. And, for me, it's really about taking bits of my day, sharing that as best I can across social media to try to encourage and inspire those that couldn't care less about the ocean or what's in the ocean to care. And then you protect what you love. I love the quote that Baba Dioum shared. I say that, let me just find this quote. Yeah, I had some shirts made a long time ago, and I was experimenting with something, and I put on the back of the shirt this quote. It says, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." And Baba Dioum said this back in 1968, and here we are in 2021, 53 years later, and it's so true. And I think what's pretty dope is that I have my journey has not been the easiest, but it's also like there was one point like I wasn't a diver, and I was that person that took it for granted. And I wouldn't say I didn't care. Like Fernando said earlier on the live, like you don't know what you don't know. And I remember as a child commuting from one end of the island to the other to go to school, and not really caring too much about coral, fish, ecosystem, even biology. I went to Warwick Academy here in Bermuda for high school, and yeah, I definitely dropped biology. Because I never had an interest. I was more like, let me work on my bike. That was a sort of a big thing here when you were a teenager, is turning 16, getting your 50cc scooter or bike and fixing that up and just riding around the island, just having a freedom to be able to get around. So I didn't have, like Fernando, like he set out to with intent to get into marine biology, get into cave diving, explore caves and all the wonders below. Where for me, I'm just like, and put that kid on my bike so I can get from A to B a little bit faster. It took years for me to reach a point where I, as Bombadil says, I was taught, and it was a by chance. I just did a scuba dive by chance. Saw what was around me when I was 25, 30 feet down, and came to like understand different things. And it was a lot to push through. I had to overcome a bit of fear, which Jess and I talked about last week. I had to overcome, the whole, it's expensive. So I had to make sacrifices. I had to say, look, well, I can't buy this over here because I need to do training. I need to, not hang out with my friends as much because I need to get some new gear. And then once I start to synthesize into this whole, community of divers, both locally and regionally, it took on this sort of new life. And that's where I am right now, where the ocean is all that really matters. Just advocating for the ocean and conservation, sustainability, and just being an activist, just acting. Like that's the thing. It's like we can talk and talk and talk and have these lives and have presentations and do slideshows and Zooms and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, act, right? Like, do something. What are you doing when you wake up in the morning? What are you doing positive, both for yourself, your life, your health, and then as an extension of that, your environment, your surroundings, your friends, your family, your co-workers. It's so much. But yeah, it's a lot worth fighting for with her, and the world is going through so much. It's such a wild time. I mean, who would have known that all this will be going on right now? But like I say, I got a couple little phrases in my life, and one of them is just do the best of what you can. Put your best foot forward. Are you living your dream? Are you living your best life? Are you so sorry for a little digress there. Magic on Nicole still way. I can't tell who's still on the live. I thought the viewership was like my accounts that I got running on the side. I thought I was talking to myself. Yeah, Magic. I'll just put your comment up, man. Yeah, right there with you, brother. I wish I met diving 20 years ago. Life would be so different. Yeah, yeah, it's been almost 20 years. It was a long haul, but I've never subscribed to the zero to hero theory. I definitely took my time. I definitely had my mentor, who I mentioned earlier on the live. And now I've got mentors and coaches, and it's funny because that's the space that I seem to have been occupying for the last couple of years, is helping to guide, mentor, and coach new and old divers that are making their way through their journey of just leveling up in the diving space. And one of the things I advocate for, that I talk about all the time, is not siloing in a specific discipline, and definitely being open-minded to dabbling into different agencies. Definitely Magic. We can talk about this on a personal level, because some of you guys that are listening, again, whether live or on the replay, might know I spent some time in the Latin dancing community as a salsa dancer. And Magic, I'll never forget. There was a time, man, I'm gonna be real. You guys are dancing up at Azure, dancing at Ozone or whatever. Guys thought we were hot. We had some DVDs, learning over DVD. Some guys were teaching classes, even, things were nice. Until we went to the New York Salsa Congress. Oh my God. I went with a group to the Congress in New York back when David Melendez, rest his soul. I miss David dearly, even though I've been out of the scene for a long time. David had the New York Salsa Congress, and I think I got so grounded. I'm just like, whoa, the bar out here is different. And then I remember going to the LA Salsa Congress. Another lifetime, you guys, another lifetime. This is a huge side. LA Salsa Congress, when Albert Torres was doing that over there, and I was like, oh my goodness, what we are doing over in Bermuda is level 1. Like, we were so beginners out here compared to other jurisdictions. And then I only bring that up, you guys, because diving, in a sense, is quite similar. And I've transitioned from salsa to scuba, but certainly traveling other parts of the region and other parts of the world where the diving just is a different flavor. You learn that the diving in Bermuda is great, but it's quite safe. And it's quite limited, because if you want to do drift diving, wall diving, swim with pelagics on a regular, get access to open caves that you can explore, open caverns, you will have to explore elsewhere, which I have, and I believe Magic has as well. So certainly